Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we have a special compilation for you of Malicious Compliance stories. This episode is meant for you to put on while you're working or driving or doing whatever you want to do. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under our @Karma Stories podcast handle. If you have a story you'd like to submit to the podcast, you can do so by email at karmastoriespod@gmail.com. If you enjoy true crime stories, be sure to check out our new podcast, Karma Crime, where we've released our 4th episode this morning. Over there, we're covering some of the lesser known true crime stories, and especially ones that have really interesting twists. Check it out for yourself, search for Karma Crime on any major podcasting platform. Alright, on to our Malicious Compliance compilation. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Fap Donkey. Daily Mass and Confession at my Catholic high school, or how I kept myself and friends from any consequences of our troublemaking. Recently told this story in another thread and was told it would do well here. I was raised in a devout Roman Catholic family who sent myself and my siblings to Catholic-run schools from kindergarten through high school. For this to make sense, some basic understanding of Catholic religious doctrine is needed. I'll keep it brief. Catholics practice something called the Sacrament of Holy Confession. The belief is that if you confess your sins to a priest and truly repent for what you've done, the priest has the power to forgive your sins in the eyes of God. Most churches will have things called confessionals for this purpose, while some newer ones are small rooms with chairs. The classic confessional is like a small closet, with the priest sitting in a closet next to you, separated by a privacy screen. Usually confession will be held after a morning daily mass service. One or more priests will set up in the confessional, congregants will go in one by one and say their confession, etc. Now, the bond of the confessional is absolutely sacrosanct within the church. Think of it like lawyer-client privilege. A priest is never ever supposed to share anything they learned in the confessional, nor act on any information they learn. Priests have to be executed by their government for refusing to testify in a trial about something they hear in a confessional. If a priest is found to have broken this bond, he will be defrocked, basically kicked out of the priesthood, and could possibly even be excommunicated, kicked out of the entire church, shunned, rejected by any devout Catholic, etc. It's a big deal. So much so that the policy for priests is that even if they later learn something through normal means that they originally first learned in the confessional, they are not allowed to act on that information, lest it even give the impression to the person who confessed that the priest was breaking the bond of the confessional. This last part is important. Well, sophomore year, my Catholic high school had its administration taken over by the Salesians, a religious order of brothers and monks who are dedicated to educating children. Our new principal was a Salesian priest, and started holding daily mass in our campus chapel every morning before classes. He really encouraged folks to go. Despite his efforts, never really took off. Would just be the usual 1 to 2 super devout teachers, maybe a particularly religious student or so. Then one Monday morning, right after homeroom, we hear the not uncommon announcement over the PA. Will the following students report to the principal's office immediately? Most of the time this happened when those students were getting disciplined for some weekend shenanigans at a private school, so we could be punished for that sort of thing. Someone threw a raging kegger, someone's parents found out, called the school, and now everyone involved was getting punished. This is when I had my epiphany. Next Monday morning, I was at morning mass bright and early, right at the front of the line to go into the confessional afterwards. Sat down with Father Jim and confessed to him in great detail all the trouble I and my friends had gotten up to over the weekend, where we went, who did what, and to whom. Everything. The first time I think he was kinda surprised, gave me some acts of contrition to perform, said the absolution, and sent me on my way. I think the first few times he was actually pleased with himself. I'm really starting to teach these kids. But I'm pretty sure that by midway through the semester, he'd caught on to what I was doing. Every now and then, he'd make a sly reference or crack a smile, but he couldn't stop me, laugh out loud. You see, by going and confessing everything we did over the weekend, to our principal first thing Monday, I was putting all that info into the bonds of the confessional. Anything I told him there, Father would never be able to act on without risking serious consequences. If he got to his office and his first message was from my friend's mom, explaining how she'd caught us all drunk as skunks, smoking cigarettes in the alley behind her house, he could thank her for the info, but he couldn't punish us for it, because I'd already told him 20 minutes earlier all about it in the confessional. This tradition lasted all the way through senior year and graduation, served me and my friends well. Some other folks must have figured things out as time went on. By the time I graduated, the Monday mass sessions were always well attended, and Father had started doing them earlier to save time for all the confessions he was hearing before class. I don't know if it was me or Father that was guilty of the malicious compliance here. Did we play him by going to confession like he insisted, but for our own selfish reasons? Or did he play us, doing some 4D chess crap? I mean, after all, in just 2 years, he somehow managed to get dozens and dozens of high school students to start regularly attending mass before class, and going to confession weekly. Win-win? Laugh out loud. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called EmotionalDraw8755. It says, "That is freaking brilliant. Did you ever tell the other students your plan, or did they just figure it out themselves?" OP responded to this one and said, "I told my friend group, but never really passed it down to the lower classes. But it was a small school, and many of my friends had younger siblings who attended the same school, so I'm sure word got around." Another commenter down below called Ryugi said, "I'm not sure who won here, if he won getting you to participate, or if you won staying out of trouble. I guess it depends on whether or not he was more interested in punishing people for wrongdoing, or for getting people to participate in holy events. It sounds like maybe he wasn't angry, so I think maybe he won." OP responded and said, "Oh, Father Jim, not his real name, was a hell of a guy. I'm sure he wasn't angry. He almost certainly knew what I was doing, especially as time went on. And knowing him, my guess is he just looked on the good side. He was always a silver lining kind of guy. He was getting more kids engaged in the church. They were sitting in the pews on Monday, listening to the reading and gospel and sermon, etc. Even if they're there for the wrong reasons, hey, they're there, like selling a timeshare. They know the only reason you're in the sales pitch is to get the free trip, but regardless, they still have you in the room listening to the sales pitch." You know, OP, there's a few ways to look at this one. Let's look at it from the eyes of the priest. He was happy that you were understanding the difference between right and wrong. He was happy that you were in church and you were going there willingly. He was annoyed that you were gaming the system, but he would privately not care because you were punishing yourselves by getting up earlier to go to church in the morning. And you sat through the whole thing before doing your confession. I'd say the priest definitely won here, and you punished yourself. This story comes to us from My Brain is a Rental. I'll call your bluff and take the marks. When I was in high school, I wasn't very good at writing essays in English. I knew all the concepts, but flushing out a few pages of BS wasn't something I could do in 45 minutes of class time. For a few weeks, we had a student teacher completing her practical block. Knowing that kids circle, substitute, and student teachers like sharks, she didn't take any crap, but overcompensated, and more than a few kids in my class checked out or outright antagonized her. This just made her more hostile to the smart butt teenagers we were. For me, checkout was when I tried to answer a question about the use of a very specific term in a poem about World War I soldiers. The author used wheeled chair instead of wheelchair. I put my hand up and gave some interpretation that made sense, and I was always told there's no wrong answers in these sorts of discussions. As a reward for participating, I was treated to a fairly harsh, "No, you're wrong," noted. So we have to complete an essay on what we've learned the last few weeks, and the question is along the lines of, how did the author make you feel when reading the text? Me, having mentally checked out of English class, not being good at that sort of thing, and being the crappy kid I was, wrote out a couple of paragraphs summarizing the message of the text and saying that I didn't feel anything when reading it. The next Monday we get our essays back and I've got a 5 out of 25. More than I thought, so those 2 paragraphs must have been pretty good. The practical teacher takes me outside and goes on about how she's disappointed and I could have done better, and how everyone else wrote 2 or 3 pages, but I didn't get half a page done. It all seemed pretty disingenuous to me because she hadn't shied away from telling me or anyone else when we were wrong. She asked why I wrote that, and I replied that I genuinely didn't have an emotional reaction to it. Why lie? She then says I have the choice to either take the fail or rewrite the essay next class. Okay, I'll take the grade. No point wasting time. Her face dropped a bit and she took a while to reply. Really? Are you sure? Yep, I'm no good at this sort of thing, remember? I didn't get it right in class, so why would that change overnight? Defeated, she sent me back to class and went next door for a few minutes. A while later, I was called out again to speak with my actual teacher. She asked me why I didn't think I could do better, and what didn't I understand about the question. After talking for a while, she said that I will have to retake the essay with a new text and question. One that was worded so I couldn't just say, I didn't. In the end, I wrote around 2 pages and passed just. The practical teacher was there for another 2 weeks or so, and I noticed a few things. First, she didn't react with outright contempt when someone gave an answer that wasn't what she wanted. Second, she didn't try to play a game of wits against any more self-sabotaging teenagers. Bonus story about my actual teacher, she was younger and really nice, but now that I'm older, I think she was one of those sensitive but naive sort of people. We had to come up with a TV pilot episode and read it out to the class. One kid read out the first episode of Burn Notice word for word. Top marks and a heap of praise. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called DIY Lobotomy. It says, honestly, the assumption that emotional reactions to a piece of writing are universal has messed up reading and writing for me more than once. Like, I don't feel anything when I read this excerpt, but apparently that's wrong and impossible, and everyone else does, so it's my fault somehow. Not everyone interprets things the same way. Refusing to accept that does nobody any good. Another user down below called Maladdicted said, as someone who has tutored students and had to mentor at work, there's nothing more devastating than seeing someone lose interest in what you're trying to teach them, and knowing you caused it. I'm passionate about language and literature, and I try to meet people where they are. If all you want to read and write about are comic books, let's talk about them. If you interpret something differently from me, I want to know why so I can see it the way you do. I might enjoy it more that way. If I said something to a learner that caused them to immediately stop trying and give up, I don't know what I'd do. Yeah, this practical teacher sounds interesting. It's like they follow the no wrong answers except yours approach to teaching. It does sound like they learned a lesson though that being harsh isn't always the best way to get results. Props to the regular teacher for stepping in and handling it with a lot more care. This story comes to us from Galway Guy 24. The shark landlord got more than he bargained for. Years ago, I moved into a new apartment while studying abroad. The landlord was, well, let's just say he was a real shark. The guy had a dozen properties rented out to students and a reputation for squeezing every last penny out of his tenants. By coincidence, I ended up dating a fellow student who happened to rent from him in the next building over, and who moved out 6 months in. So I had advance warning of what to expect on move-out day. When she moved out, she had broken a single plate and lost a fork, so somehow got charged for an entire new matching set of plates and cutlery. She even replaced the plate and fork herself, but that wasn't good enough for Mr. Sharklord. No, he insisted on billing her for a full brand new set. Of course, she learned later from her ex-flatmate that he only replaced the missing items and pocketed the difference. Imagine the profit accumulating over the years over dozens of apartments when for every student you charge the price of a new set, but actually only buy one replacement for one fork here, one glass there, pocketing the difference. Not just shady, but utterly petty. Now, when myself and my best friend had moved in, Landlord proudly tells us about the brand new mattresses in our rooms. A year later, when my friend was moving out, we did a massive deep clean, left the place sparkling, and made sure to replace anything missing. But of course, during the inspection, the landlord found issues. Surprise, surprise, he deducted and withheld my friend's entire deposit, mostly on the basis of the mattress being slightly stained and needing replacement. My friend was understandably fuming, but then we had a thought. If he was charging us for a new mattress, then my friend had technically just paid for this one. So technically, it was his. And equally technically, it just wouldn't be considerate to leave personal belongings cluttering up the landlord's apartment after he moved out, would it? Moving out means moving out. He couldn't take the mattress on the plane, obviously, so we hauled it down to a nearby park where some local homeless people hang out, and donated it. Fast forward a few days, I'm still in the apartment and about to move out shortly. My friend's already gone, and I hear the landlord arrive to show the room to a new tenant. I hear the bedroom door, and then rage. Where the F is the mattress? I have to effing buy a new one? I almost lost it right there, but I held my composure, played dumb, and listening to him fume. And a few days later, when it was my turn to leave, I knew I was getting nothing back from my deposit, and I too was going to take all of my personal belongings with me. So I took everything I had paid for, the mattress, plates, cutlery, glasses, even the light bulbs. The friendly neighborhood hobos made out like kings. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Rod Niedermeyer. It says, I had a similar landlord try this crap with me. I wrote a letter and gave it to an attorney who mailed it for me using his letterhead. He charged me a nominal fee. Landlord instantly backed down and offered me $1,000. Don't F with attorneys. Well, OP, it sounds like you guys really stepped up to the plate and you maliciously forked over the landlord. It's nice to see it happen to a jerk, and I'm sure he'll get more of what's coming to him soon. You really did pull the rug and the mattress right out from underneath him. This story comes to us from Lickawall483. You don't want me to help customers in different departments? Then don't be surprised by complaints. About 10 years ago, I applied to work at a retail store selling various tech products. It's a fairly large chain in the UK and can get pretty busy, especially after 5 p.m. or during holidays and sales. When I applied, I hoped to work in the computing department because I was passionate about different builds and had some experience building my own PC. However, I was temporarily placed in the white goods department, fridges, washing machines, etc. for training, even after admitting I knew absolutely nothing about them. Apparently, my knowledge of white goods was expected to come naturally because I'm a woman. So I bit my tongue and waited. I needed the money and was fresh out of university. After a few months, I realized I wasn't going to be transferred to the computing department no matter how much I wanted it. My sales were good, but the managers refused, fearing I might give incorrect advice. One day, at the start of the school term, the store was particularly busy. A couple came in looking for a PC for their teenage kid to game on. As a fellow gamer, I wanted to help, but my manager rudely pulled me aside and reminded me that unless we're assigned to a specific department, we're not allowed to assist customers or offer advice. Instead, he fetched another colleague to help the parents. Since my department was quiet, I was tidying up around the store and overheard the colleague trying to sell the parents an Apple PC, claiming it would be great for gaming because all professionals use them. At the time, we earned a higher commission from Apple sales. Let me tell you, Apple PCs are not ideal for gaming, especially for heavier games, which often struggle to run well or are incompatible with macOS. I didn't hear the rest of the colleague's pitch, but the parents believed him and bought an iMac for their kid. The manager was thrilled with the sale and told me to use it as an example of good selling. I told him I could have done better and predicted the customers would return it. However, I was once again reminded not to interfere with the computing department. Cue Malicious Compliance. A few days later, during a particularly busy back-to-school sale, the computing department was short-staffed due to sick calls. Only 2 people were working there, including the colleague who sold the iMac. As expected, the parents came back with the iMac, clearly looking for a refund or exchange. They spotted the colleague who sold them the PC, but as soon as he saw them, he conveniently decided it was time for his lunch break, leaving just one colleague on the floor. The parents, now visibly frustrated, queued at the tills only to be told they needed assistance from a computing department colleague, as refunds for large items couldn't be processed at the tills. Desperate, they approached me for help. I would have loved to assist, but remembering the manager's strict orders, I told them I couldn't, as I wasn't allowed to handle anything from the computing department. The parents tried other colleagues, only to get the same response. Their frustration grew, as did that of other customers who couldn't make purchases because only computing department staff were authorized to sell those products. The only remaining colleague was overwhelmed, juggling multiple customers, while the colleague responsible for the iMac sale had already signed out for the day, and the other staff member was running late. Within 20 minutes, a massive queue of angry customers formed at the tills, all demanding to speak to the manager. The overwhelmed cashier had no choice but to call the store and floor managers. When the managers arrived, they tried to shift the blame onto the rest of us. I reminded them of the strict company policy against helping outside our assigned department, and pointed out that we hadn't received the necessary training to assist. Of course, this only made the customers angrier, leading to a commotion at the tills and further delays. I'm not sure how this situation resolved because I was pulled away to help an older lady, but that day, we received a flood of complaints on various websites. Many customers criticized the store's policy and complained about staff refusing to help because it's not their department. This prompted several brainstorming sessions about reducing complaints, though none of the ideas were ever implemented. You'd think they'd learn and change the policy, but no. Instead, they gave extra training to the existing computing department staff and allowed other colleagues to sell smaller items like mice, keyboards, consoles, games, and printers, but not laptops, PCs, or VR systems. Naturally, the complaints continued. The last time I visited the store to buy a laptop for my mom using a voucher, the policy was still the same. We waited around 45 minutes for someone to finalize the sale. At least I got the opportunity to voice my frustrations to the store manager, letting him know exactly what I thought of their ridiculous policy. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Contractor. It says, "That manager 100% found out you were right about that return, and was too chicken crap to admit you knew better than him. But what else is new?" Another user down below called Dad of Triplets said, "Sounds rather like Curry's if you ask me. The staff there on the PC section don't know their butt from their elbow, and it's the same with pretty much all of the sections. I have been in there to have a look, knowing all about the product, and will ask questions I already know the answer to, and they BS to try and make this sale. The one time I tried to buy a PC from them, they didn't have it in stock. Then I found eBuyer and Scan Computers, and that was the last time I ever thought about buying a PC from Curry's. I have only ever found one salesperson in Curry's who wasn't interested in making a sale, only discussing the finer details about tumble dryers and which one was better to go for. Still went online to Costco and got it delivered from there afterwards though, as the warranty is much better than Curry's, 2 years versus 1 year." OP responded to this one and said, "I was trying hard not to name them, but yeah, the sales policies are insane. Managers tell staff to add the care plan as a direct debit and make it sound like a discount to get a commission, hoping the customer won't notice. They throw a fit if a customer refuses to take the care plan. One time, my mom was buying an all-in-one PC and the sales colleague threw a tantrum because she refused to follow his recommendation. He kept insisting it wasn't in stock and then refused to sell it to her, etc. It sounds like OP isn't working there anymore, as they said the last time they went in was to get their mom a laptop, and they were able to antagonize the manager at that point. Which, let's be honest, sounds absolutely amazing, and we all wish we could do that. At least OP has a story they can tell in job interviews going forward, like, "Oh, there was this one time I watched a store implode because they wouldn't let anyone outside the computing department touch anything in the computer department. It's like they didn't enjoy sales or something." This story comes to us from Melantop. New boss is upset about overtime. Long story, I worked in Aviation EMS as a pilot for many years after retiring from the military. Great, stable job, and I still served local communities, so I maintained a sense of pride and community service. In the last few years, corporate decided that our flight volume warranted a second helicopter to be stationed with us, as we were consistently one of the top performing bases in the company. Long story short, a different type of helicopter with different capabilities was to be co-located with us. The new aircraft had a mix of a sister company's ownership and our company's nurses and medics. Odd setup, different companies under one umbrella, but with different rules for the crews. Crew equals nurse and medic. As a top performer in the meantime, our base was given a newer, much faster aircraft to further increase our already stellar productivity. We were always first call, while the other base and aircraft was on reserve. Massive animosity ensued as our base would get 3 to 5 flights a day, while the reserve, more capable aircraft sat on hold for possible turndowns. This happened regardless of weather conditions. Nurses and medics were all employed by the same company. Even on severe clear days, we did back-to-back calls while the other base waited. More animosity. Fast forward to one of the nurses on the losing end of the situation being promoted to boss of both bases in terms of operations and facilities. Changes were made and equitable flight volume distribution was implemented. Now the workload is much more even and, honestly, fair. But quick changes come with a reality check. Deals were made behind the scenes between the two air bosses, agreeing on who would take which flight and when. This information didn't trickle down to me or my fellow pilot, who works the opposite shift. This is important because we pilots generally show up 30 minutes early to avoid late flights that might prevent us from bringing the crew back. We have strict flight time regulations to follow per the FAA, or we risk certificate action, meaning we stop flying forever. With that background for non-aviation folks, I walk in one day 30 minutes early as usual and hear the tones go off. Flight request. I take it and we complete the flight without issue, except for the flurry of phone calls asking why I took it. Reminder, the new rules about which base takes which flight are beyond me. Confused, I politely tell them to F off because I literally just did my job. As the new base boss was still on the flight schedule for the day, I was thrilled to have a face-to-face about it. I got reamed for taking crews on overtime. Huh? What? Excuse you? That has never been a thing in almost a decade of working here. We get the patient where they need to go. Overtime be darned. That's our job. Cue Malicious Compliance. If paying overtime is now an issue, fine, I'll comply. If we get a flight request that even remotely risks overtime, I'll call her for approval before accepting. Don't want to upset the mythical bean counters in lieu of potentially saving a life. This isn't, by the way, a normal process for taking a flight, and I will not decline one over it, but I've thoroughly enjoyed waking the boss up at all hours of the night. I didn't start this, I'm just complying. I've asked for written guidance on the new policies, but until then, the 3 a.m. calls will keep coming. Alright, does anybody else here think that corporate micromanagement shouldn't really be a thing in a life or death situation? OP and OP's colleagues have a very important job and there are lives on the line. And this little thing about overtime? Oh, what are they supposed to do? Be on site helping somebody stay alive and then be like, oh, yeah, you can die now because I'm going into overtime, so I'm off the clock now, bye. I do have a serious question for anybody who works in airplanes or helicopters or flight in general. If an EMS pilot is out on a flight and it takes longer than they thought it was going to, and they go over their hours, is there an exception and they're able to fly back no problem? How does that actually work? If you're on YouTube and you know, comment down below. Oh, and OP, continue to make those 3 a.m. phone calls. This story comes to us from Cryptid Fan. Need justification to purchase a box of tissues? You got it. In my early 30s, I, now 40 female, worked for a university as a project manager. We were state funded, and therefore every nickel of spending had to be run through our department accountant, who was not terribly well liked. She was very nitpicky, would demand documentation on some expenses, but not others, and would be very condescending when she had to send stuff back for correction, aka done to her liking. It had nothing to do with being incorrect. Rumor had it that she only got and stayed in her position because she was related to a board member. That being said, I got used to her shenanigans pretty early and just did my best to get my purchases through her as quickly as possible so that I could continue my projects. About a year into my employment, I was handed a project that had been initiated by our director. It was a 5-year training program that was described to me as the director's baby. My manager got it off the ground and then passed it to me to maintain for the remainder of the program. I threw myself into this program not only because I enjoyed what I did, but also the director was cool as hell. I'm still friends with him on social media, and I wanted the program to succeed for him. I had a project coordinator that worked with me for detail stuff, like ordering supplies and working with facilities. My focus was on budget, content, and working with the clients. After she and I had run several successful training sessions under this new program, we needed to order more supplies of standard training stuff, like pens, notepads, name tags, etc. Something else we regularly used per the director's request was boxes of tissues, which for some unknown reason was not something we could get from our office supply vendor. My coordinator had been buying them in bulk at a warehouse store with her purchase card and then storing them in the basement, only taking what we needed for each training session. When she went to submit the receipt for the new container of tissue boxes, the accountant lit into her about how tissues were not an approved purchase. Even when she showed the accountant an email from the beginning of the program showing that the director has requested tissues to be provided to the participants, she stated that the director didn't make or enforce the purchasing policy, which is technically true. When my coordinator, who was normally a very bold and brassy lady, came into my office looking defeated and told me she was going to have to take the tissues back unless the accountant received sufficient written justification, I got pissed. I could have pushed the issue up the chain, but I didn't want to bother my manager or the director with this nonsense. Instead, I decided to do what I do best: be annoying. One thing I am good at is writing extremely detailed BS. I can elaborate on any detail, no matter how small. I'm especially good at it when I'm mad. So I popped myself down in front of my computer and, in one go, wrote a 5.5-page email. We did a print preview to see exactly how long it was, on why we needed boxes of tissues for this program. I never put in there because the director said so, but I listed off every other possible justification, and then wrote a mini essay on each of those points. My coordinator was sitting in the corner of my office giggling as she watched my hands fly over the keyboard. I sent the email around noon. Just before quitting time, my coordinator stuck her head back into my office to let me know that the tissue purchase had been approved in our system. I never got a reply to my email. The accountant never said anything to me or my coordinator, but my coordinator never again got pushback on buying boxes of tissues. Alright, so I know you guys like to groan when I use a bunch of puns in my comments at the end of a story, but I've got to read to you a little bit of a comment chain here that includes OP and a bunch of other people. It starts out with Coder Joe 1 saying her argument was tissue thin. OP replied with, my argument was ultra strong. Butterfly Garden said, you had an opportunity to ply your skills. OP responded with, really glad I didn't blow that one. Nataline 50 said, dealing with a problem like that is nothing to sneeze at. OP responded with, I'll just never understand why she had to be such a booger about these things. Kitty Kiddo said, she's got tissues. OP responded with, seriously, it's not like it was a big deal. That old cat responded with, she certainly wasn't very charming to you folks, maybe too much northern exposure, either that or she puffs some bad grass. There you go, I take no responsibility for any one of those puns. This story comes to us from Helown, the parking feud that finally got a solid solution. Hopefully a good one for you. A few details are changed for anonymity. I work at a niche retail store located in the heart of town. Our customers are dedicated and often travel from afar just to visit us. So having a clear and accessible parking lot is crucial for our business. Unfortunately, our next door neighbors, a family-run landscaping and garden supply store, have been a thorn in our side for years when it comes to parking. The tension between my boss and the landscaping store owner goes back over a decade before I joined, all over something trivial. I know the landscaper once complained about a tree on our side of the lot, which was unsightly for their customers. It was the pettiest neighbor drama you could imagine, but it festered for years. The final straw came after the Rona, when the physical business in town started picking back up and our parking lot started overflowing with cars again, many belonging to the landscaping store's customers. See, our two parking lots are connected. Ours is about twice the size of his, but the landscaper had decided to reserve almost all his spots for his landscaping vans. Ironically, these vans are rarely even there during business hours. As a result, his customers just parked in our lot, leaving us with few spaces for our own customers. My boss, trying to be reasonable, approached the landscaper with a suggestion. Maybe they could adjust their parking setup to free up a few more spaces for customers, and that their vans were welcome to park in our lot if their lot was overfull. But the landscaper shot down the idea immediately, insisting that it was absolutely crucial to reserve all of those spaces for his vans, even though they were rarely there during the day. The conversation turned heated, ending with my boss threatening to put up a fence to separate the lots and enforce parking. The landscaper practically daring him shot back, "Go ahead," probably knowing how expensive that would be. As you can imagine, it ended with both men storming off and not speaking for 2 years. Typical neighbor stuff. Fast forward to recently, and we got a golden opportunity when a parking management company approached us with a proposal. They offered to install automated license plate cameras to enforce parking, allowing us to find vehicles that stayed beyond a generous 3-hour free window if they hadn't paid. The setup would be free, we'd get most of the revenue, and they would keep any fines issued. It was perfect, especially since we were losing space to freeloaders, wouldn't really impact the customers of the nearby stores, and if anyone had a good reason to park there for longer, then we could give them an extension at our discretion. However, for the cameras to work, they needed to cover both our entrance and the landscaping store's entrance. Being the considerate neighbor, again, my boss had the parking company rep reach out to the landscaper to explain the deal and benefits. But true to form, the landscaper didn't even let the rep finish before kicking him out, making it very clear, that under no circumstances would his lot become a paid parking zone. Instead of going through the hassle of putting up the necessary expensive fence, my boss had a better idea. Big rocks. One of his construction buddies had a stash of leftover rocks from a recent project and offered to place them for a great price. The parking company even agreed to front the cost to be repaid through future parking revenue. On Monday morning, before opening hours, one of the buddy's employees, a big burly guy with arms like tree trunks, arrived with a truck and crane to place the rocks. The rocks were neatly spaced to allow pedestrians to pass with carts, but completely blocked vehicle access. The landscaper stormed out, yelling and trying to intimidate the worker into stopping. But the worker, unfazed, calmly told him to step back for his own safety, which made the much smaller landscaper back down and retreat in frustration. The rocks weren't just a physical barrier, they quickly became a mental obstacle for the landscaper's employees. Their muscle memory kept bringing them into our lot, only for them to realize too late that they couldn't drive through anymore. We watched from our newly installed surveillance cameras just in case the neighbor tried anything, trying not to burst out laughing as their vans ended up awkwardly stuck. They'd have to reverse out and go all the way around to their own entrance, only to perform a series of painful maneuvers to squeeze into their now much smaller parking area. At one point, we even caught one of their rushing vans clipping a rock while trying to maneuver. A little bonus for our viewing pleasure. The next day, the parking company arrived to install the license plate cameras and set up the signage, which took a few hours. Throughout the installation, the landscaper's family members were prowling around our lot, snapping photos and videos as if they were on a mission to find a violation. But the parking company was very professional and had done everything by the book, so there was nothing for them to report. In the meantime, my boss was positively glowing with satisfaction as he helped direct the installation. Here's the best part: we noticed that the neighbor's family had started parking their personal vehicles in our lot, likely out of spite to mess with us. One day, my coworker saw one of the family members dash out of their store and sprint to their car. We thought it was odd at the time, but didn't think much of it until the following week, when the landscaper's son came into our store looking a bit embarrassed. Apparently, he had accidentally overstayed the 3-hour limit and received a $150 fine. The son practically begged us to waive it, insisting it was just a simple mistake. My boss politely responded, "Oh, I'd really love to help, but it's out of our control now. The parking company handles all the fines." The look on his face was priceless. He left, shoulders slumped, retreating back to their store. Ever since, our lot has been blissfully clear, and our customers have had no trouble finding spaces. Meanwhile, the landscapers have been grumbling as they have a harder time maneuvering their vans, still trying to pretend they're not bothered. As for my boss, he's been smiling a lot more lately. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people get exactly what they asked for. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user who is absolutely after my heart with this one. They're called Sordo Crabs, and they said, "The landscaping dude should have known what happens when you put a neighbor between a rock and a hard place." You know, I can actually think of a few places in town here, stores that I like to go to every once in a while, where the people that own the stores or work at the stores take the prime parking spots right in front of the building that would have been best for the customers, and they really don't care. There's ample parking around back for them, but they choose to park right up front where those customers really want to park their cars. I'm guessing that actually hurts their business more than they might think. I think the only thing that would have made this story better and actually kinda hilarious is if OP's boss originally put in the order for the rocks with the landscaping company next door. And when they asked where they wanted them, they would say, right down the edge of our parking lot, just to see the look on their face. That would have been priceless. This story comes to us from Sivrin R. Is the cable live? Then let me finish it myself. This one is from my early days when I was working as a technician for an internet provider company, but it still brings a smile to my face when I remember it. And recently had a technician coming to install my internet, and it all came back. I was working mostly residential buildings, and my job at that time was pretty simple. Come to the basement, find our distribution box, patch the cable to the right endpoint for the requesting flat, go to the flat, fix cable outlet when needed, verify cable is live, there is a signal coming through and it's the right signal, this is somewhat important, connect modem, verify all good, tell the happy customer the internet is ready to use, and off I go. One day, I'm doing my job again, but got this know-it-all guy. Had to call him to let me in the building, and it was a blast right from the start. First, he told me he knew exactly where my company distribution box is, only to lead me to the electricity provider box. Then, he is absolutely sure that his flat number is X, while the papers state Y, and indeed it was Y. There were a few more helps from his side, which I skipped to avoid this becoming a book. But eventually, we are up in the flat, and I'm going to check the signal. But the guy is like, "Come on, hurry up, need my connection, need to work on super important stuff." I tell him I need to test the signal first, but here he opens up my Malicious Compliance window. He says, "You do not need to do that, just connect the cable. If the cable is live, just go and I will finish it myself." I still give him a chance by explicitly stressing that test will take some minutes only, but if it does not work, I will not be able to come back earlier than in a couple of days. No, absolutely not, he can finish it by himself. Okay, my man, you've got it. Already too long story, to make it short, cable was live, but the signal was from local TV antenna, not from our cable internet. This was actually a relatively common issue at that time. Older residential buildings, reused wiring, cable patching to a wrong one, and was not so hard to fix once you knew what was wrong. I can only imagine what the guy did to try and make it work before calling our call center to schedule my visit again. What I know is, I came to the flat 3 days later, only to be greeted by his lovely wife, which made me some tea and thanked me for being kind and fixing the problem. To come to a closure, when a technician came to install my internet a few days ago, I made him some tea and told him to take his time and do all that's needed. We had a little chat, and guess what? The process and issues are still the same. And recently he was telling his junior colleague why checking if the cable is live is not enough. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Stage Party. It says, "People like this are hilarious. In the time it takes for them to argue with you, you could have done the job and left. But no, they must argue." I like to call that the child mentality because that's the exact same thing that my kids do when we ask them to clean up. They spend more time complaining about cleaning up than they do actually doing the cleaning up itself. But no matter how much you try to explain that to them, it just doesn't register. OP, sorry you had to deal with the big man-child, but the fact that you walked out and said, okay, that was the best way to deal with it. Let them deal with their own mistakes. This story comes to us from 50 Many Questions. I can't give students a 0 for using AI unless I have proof? No problem. I'm a high school English teacher. I have two major annoyances when it comes to kids doing work. First, a lot of kids don't read or listen to directions. Assignment instructions are written on the papers and I read them out loud, but I still have students asking me, "What are we doing?" That's no big deal though. It's a pretty normal thing to deal with this as a teacher. The real issue bugging me is students cheating on writing assignments using ChatGPT. I'm pretty good at spotting AI-generated essays, but the problem is that when I try to accuse students of using AI, they deny it. They act outraged that I would accuse them even though we both know they're playing dumb. I usually just give them a 0 and move on with my life, but there's always the fear that one of them might take the issue to administration. If they did, I'm not confident that admin would back me up. It's hard to prove something is AI generated, and these days, the higher-ups are more likely to side with the student. So I hatched a plan. I gave an open-ended creative writing assignment. The direction said to write a story about anything you want, and then answer some questions about the story you wrote. The thing is, when you ask ChatGPT, tell me a story, it always spits out the exact same story. About a girl named Alara who lives in the woods. Once upon a time, in a small village nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, there lived a young woman named Alara. She was known throughout the village for her curiosity and sense of adventure, always eager to explore the world beyond the familiar paths of her home. So, in slightly smaller print under the instructions I wrote, if your main character's name is Alara, minus 99 points. Lo and behold, I got 1 or 2 kids turn in a story about a girl named Alara who lives in woods. When I turned back the papers with a grade of 1 out of 100, because I find that stings more than a 0, the kids predictably asked why. And all I had to do was point to the instructions that they didn't read. There was no need to mention AI, we both knew what they did. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Squirrely Girly. It says, "When I was in college, I had an ethics professor catch a student cheating. This was way back before AI, but people could still find papers online. The student denied he cheated, but the professor showed him where he found it online, and pointed to the name of the author. It was the professor." Another commenter down below called Porkrine said, "The best example of this that I saw was a professor who distributed their assignments online. In the middle of the instructions, in tiny white-on-white text, was a prompt to cite a particular source. ChatGPT doesn't care if the text is invisible, it goes ahead and cites the mentioned author, who, as it turns out, is the professor's cat. If a teacher really wanted to stop the AI problem in their classroom, all they'd really have to do is make all writing of essays and whatnot in-class assignments where they have to write them down on paper. I understand that people can utilize AI in good ways and it will help us out in some ways, but I also think that if we have something that does all the thinking for us, that we're not exercising that muscle of a brain that we have. And what happens when you don't exercise a muscle? Well, it atrophies. That same thing can happen with your brain if you're just not using it. This story comes to us from Mr. Coco1234. My boss wanted efficiency, so I gave him just that. I've been working in my field for a while, and I've always taken pride in doing a thorough, reliable job. I'm a high performer and had a solid track record with my previous bosses who valued quality and consistency. But then Eric became our new boss, and things took a hard turn. Eric was all about efficiency. He came from a startup environment where things didn't need to be perfect, just right and fast. He wanted things done fast, even if it meant cutting corners. In meetings, he'd throw around phrases like, "time is money," and "every second counts." Sure, efficiency is important, but Eric took it to an extreme. He didn't care about the quality of our work, he just wanted it done now. Nuances, quality checks, and double checking went right out the window. Then, he decided to implement a time tracking and output policy. This meant logging every task we worked on with specific time limits. Anything taking longer than his arbitrary limits was flagged, and we'd have to explain ourselves in a weekly efficiency review. Essentially, the new rule was, don't need to do it completely right, just do it fast. I tried explaining to him that rushing through things would lead to mistakes, but Eric insisted this would maximize productivity. Frustrated but willing to play by his rules, I decided I'd give him exactly what he asked for. If Eric wanted speed, I'd deliver speed. I stopped double checking everything. Tasks that normally took an hour to review and refine, I was now completing in 15 minutes, barely glancing at them. Documents that required analysis, I'd throw some data together and call it a day. Anything that usually got a thorough review now only got a quick single pass, tops. Naturally, errors began cropping up. Typos, incorrect numbers, misplaced data, bad presentations. Mistakes were popping up everywhere. But technically, I was working exactly within Eric's time limits. Eric was thrilled with how much faster I was working, and started bragging in meetings about how efficient our team had become. Then, the clients started to notice. One of our biggest accounts found a major error in a document I'd whipped together at record speed. That led to an awkward phone call with Eric. More issues came up, and after about 2 weeks of optimized efficiency, I got called into his office with his boss. Eric, visibly irritated, asked me why the quality of my work had taken such a nosedive. I calmly explained that I was meeting all of his time limits exactly as instructed. I told him that quality work requires time, which I simply didn't have under his new policy. Eric sat there in silence, realizing his policy had backfired. His boss stared at him, completely stunned and red in the face. After an awkward pause, Eric muttered about re-evaluating the time limits on tasks. The efficiency policy quietly disappeared soon after. Now I'm back to doing my job properly. Eric's under performance review, and his boss is closely involved with all our operations, especially with big clients. Why reinvent the wheel when things are working fine? And why try to rein in the high performers to stamp your authority? Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called DevCatOTA. It says, I worked for a subsidiary of AT&T, and they sent us a poster that read, if you don't have the time to do it right the first time, when will you have the time to fix it? I think I can summarize this story very quickly with just a few words. The choices are on time, under budget, or bug-free, but you can only have two. This story comes to us from CLH Harrison. Who says we need that anti-slip surface on the outdoor pavement? Everyone below you, that's who. Story takes place in the latter half of 2022 in the UK. Names and company changed and not mentioned due to NDA and overzealousness on behalf of the company. Part 1, the issue begins. I worked at a major tourist attraction during this time, and we got thousands of customers every day. Part of our attraction was outside, and we had expanded part of the outside to accommodate new parts for the attraction. In order to blend with the theme of the new section, a brand new brick pavement was installed in the area. Upper management had, at the time, a tendency to not think things 100% through, and this was no different. The big thing was that it was decided not to install an anti-slip surface on the brick pavement. Now, we were in the middle of summer, and it was a particularly dry summer, but nonetheless, when it isn't dry, we got a lot of rain and a lot of snow and frost. We need that anti-slip surface. We told upper management this, and as per usual, fell on deaf ears. Winter comes far too soon, and with it all the rain that was meant for summer and to make up for dry autumn. And the winter of 2022 was bad for the UK. Temperatures fell to single digits, and then negative in the Celsius. With the cold came a permanent frost over the brick pavement, and the beginning of Malicious Compliance. Part 2, the compliance. The first slips and falls heralded us to the idea. At the time, the company was required to write in paper accident and incident reports about everything if something bad happened. Now, anyone who's worked in tourist attractions, we've all seen kids fall from being too excited, and we often do a polite check to see if missing limbs are present, and if all is good, we just ignore it. No one likes paperwork. Not to mention, due to upper management's distaste for us, we had to take the long way to the offices where the paper was to be filled in, and get someone to cover us while we filled it in. Upper management hated us being in their special offices and not out with the paying customers. It is worth mentioning in their defense, our lower managers and middle managers were on our side, because even they knew what upper management was doing was utter nonsense. So they saw what we were doing and agreed with it. What happened was, every single slip that occurred outside on the impromptu ice rink that was the brick pavement, we would report. That's about 15 to 20 minutes of us in the warmth, not freezing our butts off, writing about how someone had slipped in the exact same manner as the last 10 people, all in plain view of upper management. I'd like to believe they began working from home more due to us being there in their office. I learned from one of our lower managers that is a dear friend that the stack of reports handed to upper management was measurable in inches. I do not regret saying I was one of the top 3 contributors to that pile. Part 3, the bare minimum response. Upper management finally began to make efforts to fix the situation. They decided to just cordon off the vast majority of the brick pavement with temporary ugly barriers, and put down anti-slip mats to make a path for the parts of the attraction that they wanted visitors to walk in. They thought they had won. We knew better. Anyone who has worked with tourists knows that tourists are a special breed of stupid. Told not to touch the very important items, they will touch. Told to keep their kids near and not let them wander off. I think the record for no lost kids was 4 hours. And so these barriers that everyone is required to respect, well, clearly, it doesn't apply to me. Each time we told people not to go underneath these barriers, they looked like deer caught in the headlights, and the barriers were just low enough that kids would duck under and run straight onto the ice and onto their butts. Even more accident and incident reports rocked up as a result, and all upper management would do is tell us low, barely above minimum wage earners to do a better job policing this part of the attraction. Part 4, wake up call. School kids. Oh, how we loathed schools. Mostly teenager ones. Little kids, no more than 5 to 10. Oh, they were delightful. We were happy with them. The main reason was because the teachers, who are still responsible for the kids no matter what, actually followed our guidelines. So naturally we liked the little ones and were genuinely more concerned for them than normal. We all then had our moment of fear when it was reported that a 7-year-old boy had slipped and fallen on the ice, no doubt having been playing with classmates and unintentionally not seeing where he was going. That didn't save his 2 front teeth chipping and a call for our on-site first aid team to come and help. Luckily, he seemed alright besides the fact that the Tooth Fairy was going to be paying double that night. But for us, lower and middle management, it was the final straw. I wish I had taken a photo of that accident and incident report for posterity, the number of people co-signing it. Part 5, the fallout. Nobody wants a lawsuit, and the kid's parents had grounds to do so like nobody's business. The fact a child had been injured from negligence did not look good on upper management's part, and it wasn't as if they could pretend nothing had happened. Everyone had been telling them about the risk, and when it got to the bigwigs, I can only imagine what was said. Miraculously, and within 2 days of the kid's teeth, they put an anti-slip surface on the brick pavement, at what was probably more of a cost than had they just done so in the summer. The barriers were removed, and the number of paper accident and incident reports dramatically decreased. They finally also got around to installing tablet devices with which we could fill in reports without needing to drop position. Our lives were made easier, they got an earful, and that kid probably has a fun story for when he's older and has kids himself. I'd like to say upper management learned their lesson and took our words on board for future endeavors, but that is like expecting the dog to not poop on the carpet after the first time you shove their noses into it. I no longer work there for other reasons, and many of the people who joined in the act of malicious compliance have since gone elsewhere. But for nearly 3 glorious months, you had never seen a department work together like ours in that way before or since. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called J Nelson Ninjax. It says, I was about to say you would think, but then quickly realized that you were dealing with upper level management who are incapable of thinking for themselves and certainly walk around with blinders on. I'm only surprised that it only took one child being seriously injured for them to decide to do what they should have done before. It probably took the combined brain power of the upper manglement to come to that conclusion. OP responded to this one and said, could count the number of times I saw any one of them amongst us lot with one hand. 3 months before I left, one of them realized I wasn't even from the UK. I'd been working there for 2 years. I missed the people at the attraction. I don't miss the management, even if we did work together beautifully at that time. I feel like in this case, they could have gotten action a little bit faster if they'd changed the way that they were reporting the incidents. Like if these incidents were being reported directly to the legal department, something might have happened a little more quickly, considering that they would be paying out people who fell and then sued them. Another option would have been to report directly to the health and safety executive who oversees workplace safety. That would have definitely ruffled some feathers with the upper management and had them act quickly. That last one even allows for anonymous reporting, so that might be the best way to go. This story comes to us from Anti-Hate Account. Want to force me to give out resumes when I already have a job? Fine then. I, 22 male, am the primary caretaker of one of my family members. Among other chronic illnesses, she is a diagnosed narcissist with early dementia. As per my family's request, I moved with her and took an online job as a trilingual translator to ensure I would be there 24/7 should she have an emergency. Somehow, she has interpreted my constant presence as me not having a job, despite me explaining several times that I did, in fact, work. She went to the point of stealing my ID and debit card, saying she would not be giving them back to me unless I gave out resumes where she told me to. I have searched the whole house and couldn't find them, so I was forced to comply. I have a huge amount of respect for people who work in these fields, but I am not taking a job as a cleaner or a cashier when I work in my field of choice. That's when I noticed all the places she was forcing me to send out resumes to were requesting a cover letter. This is where the malicious compliance takes place. I took an already written cover letter and changed some details, so it would be like I wrote it myself. I made her read it and approve it as per her request, then added the following sentences in my second paragraph. If this letter arrives on your desk, please know that this application has been sent without my consent. Already having an online full-time job, please do not take it into consideration. As you can imagine, I didn't get called back much. Only one place sent me an email, and once I explained the situation, their HR team wished me luck with my situation and told me this motivated them to read cover letters more carefully. At the same time, I contacted my boss. I knew they sometimes open in-office positions, and my boss is one of the nicest people I know. So I contacted her and asked if there was any way I could get the next in-office position, telling her why exactly I was asking that. I've been working there for 6 months and she never had any complaints about me, so she sent me a permanent contract starting in January 2025 for their office. It's overseas in a country where I'm legally allowed to work without a work visa. I won't specify which country since I have the intention of disappearing there. My flight is already booked and only my best friend knows what's going on. I have a letter already written out where I tell my family to not warn the authorities. As soon as I land, my bank account will be closed and my phone subscription canceled. And after 5 years, I will ask to become a citizen in that country and won't renew the paperwork necessary to prove my citizenship in my birth country. I have 3 younger siblings. All of them are still in middle school. They have their own email addresses that our parents don't know about, so I will send them an email telling them this is not their fault and that they're the ones in the family who are allowed to contact me. I'll also add that I will answer to any questions they have once they turn 18. I'm excited. I'm excited to start a new life. I'm excited to get out of this family who has been the source of most of my problems my whole life. I'm excited to finally escape toxic people in a toxic environment that was destroying my mental health. Only 2 months left, and after 22 long years of waiting, I'll finally be free. All of this because my last straw was forcing me to send out job applications. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Dogwood Cat. It says, also tell your local police that any missing person reports for you should be treated as misuse of emergency services, wasting police time. Tell them that your family knows you're leaving the country and they might try something foolish in desperation to keep you in the country. Don't add this detail to the letters you send your family. Let them find out the fun way. You also have to ensure that the family member in question is cared for until the rest of the family has a chance to figure that out. OP responded to this one and said, I'll do that once I'm gone because I have no faith in my country's police. If they learn that I'm a caregiver, they could be capable of informing my family of it despite my legal right as an adult to disappear. When I do tell them, I'll also lie on where I am. I'll start the paperwork necessary for her to get governmental help to get a nurse. I don't think I can do much more without betraying myself. Another commenter down below called Waglo Maom said, fair's fair. Good luck to you with everything. By the way, out of curiosity, I know it's not your problem anymore, but who's going to be taking over that family member of yours after you're gone? OP responded and said, I'll try my best to not sound heartless while answering, even though at this point, I don't really care anymore since it's not the first time there's been an issue between this specific family member and me. Only difference is that I was a college student and didn't have many options back then. I doubt anyone in the family will be willing to help to the extent I did, and my siblings are too young to be forced to take over. With such diagnoses, they can probably get financial help from the government to hire a nurse and get her one of those medical alert necklaces or similar systems. The family cares too much about reputation and stuff to consider a nursing home. Although on the mid-long term, this seems inevitable to me. The comments on this story are overwhelmingly positive for OP doing something to get out of that situation and do what they want for their life. I did a little bit of looking through OP's comment history, and a lot of their replies tell a little bit more about this situation and the fact that they really are stuck there doing something that they really don't want to do for people who are completely ungrateful for what they actually are doing. I hope OP finds what they want in life when they get out of this situation, but I do also hope that one of their siblings isn't roped into taking care of this family member now that OP won't be there to do it. This story comes to us from PureHeart7915. Sick leave needs a note. Just read a post about sick leave policy backfiring and wanted to post my own story about it. Old work friend, we'll call him Jesse, is a retired US Marine. Guamanian, chill as hell, and un-F-withable. He was the coolest guy you'd ever meet, personable and worked hard. Can't say enough good things about him. Our supervisor was brand new and one of these perpetual yes men. Anything the middle and upper management mentioned, even in passing, was holy gospel for this guy. I tell you, his lips were brown. He did everything in his power to kiss the starfish. Regardless of the impact on everyone's personal life or work environment, it didn't even register with this guy. 0 F's given for his people, just whoever was above him. Jesse, being older, was looking at retirement. Between the Corps and his civvy job, he was doing a 9 to 5. He was beginning to have health issues and had frequent doctor's appointments. Right around the holidays, everyone wants to take leave, and we have a 50% staffing policy pretty much across the board at work. No more than half of our shop can be off at the same time. So it gets pretty cutthroat around Thanksgiving and Christmas. Everyone wants to flounce out for the holidays. New boss wants to be the personal savior of everything company, tells everyone that we're going to do a 75% staff instead, and proceeds to shut down all of our leave slips. Cue everyone getting sick. Boss gets mad and demands doctor's notes for all sick days, appointments, anything outside of work. Well, we all have pretty good insurance, so a $25 copay is now a day off bounty, and there is pretty much a mutiny in the shop over the butt hat's continuous stream of stupid policy. This hits Jesse especially hard. He's got a host of crap breaking down in his old body. After about the 6th or 7th time, the new boss has verbally dressed down Jesse for taking excessive sick time. He snaps. You want notes? You got 'em. He went through the union contract and discovered that documentation doesn't have to be from an actual doctor. Need a day because you felt sick? All you need per the union contract is a receipt for a bottle of Tylenol. Dentist appointment? The reminder note for your next appointment. The crown jewel of the shenanigans was his colonoscopy. Jesse got the proctologist to screenshot a picture of the inside of his colon and used it as his note. He retired a champion. Place isn't the same without him. Does anybody else feel like the boss got a real backdoor education from Jesse's note policy? I mean, the colonoscopy pick was a bold move, truly taking things to the bottom line. Jesse's humor was definitely deeply rooted. I honestly do hope the boss got really butthurt about it, and I really feel like Jesse did a great job covering his own rear. This story comes to us from Board Eastly. Do not interrupt when I'm talking. This was a few years back. After over a decade of doing a complex job above average, getting many compliments and letters of thanks, my new boss was irritated at me interrupting. My role was everything the technical people didn't do. Trash duty, phones, conference room, calendars, contracts, finance, training, facilities, purchasing, equipment, etc. It was realistic to say that a couple times a day, some wildfires, often technical work stoppages, needed the boss's input. This, even after I headed off many problems before they reached his attention. About a couple weeks in, he told me that under no circumstances was I to interrupt any conversations he was in, and like a good little bootlicker, the second in charge added that he too was tired of my interruptions and needed to stop. As karma would have it, not even a day later, both of them were deep into a conversation about baseball, absolutely nothing to do with work, and normally I would have interrupted. They both saw me multiple times and didn't ask what I needed. I waited patiently with pleading eyes while they stretched out their conversation. After a few minutes, I started shifting foot to foot. Probably looked like I needed to use the bathroom. and yet they didn't stop. Finally, when they soaked up all the fun they could and ran out of baseball things to say, the boss, in a very snarky tone, asks if there's something I needed him for. Yes sir, your boss's boss, Mr. Nameless here, is waiting on the phone. I could see the blinking phone line from where I was standing, and he was indeed still waiting, and he needs to speak to you right now. Not one smirk or iota of disrespect from me, but I did leave to use the bathroom even though I didn't need it. Policy cancelled right after that call. Laugh out loud. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Saucy McSauceface. Beautiful name. You are my new hero. Well played. Just watch your back. They sound like the kind of people that would throw you under the bus. Another user down below called OKGrape2063 said, sorry really big boss, I was instructed to never interrupt. Boss and Big Boss are having an important conversation about baseball. They will be with you shortly. I 100% agree with this commenter. I would go back to the boss every 3 to 5 minutes and remind them that I can't interrupt them because they're having a conversation about baseball. Wouldn't you have loved to listen in on that conversation once the big boss finally got them on the phone and they had to explain what was so important that they couldn't take the call right away? This story comes to us from Sigback. Very compliant, not so malicious. Okay, here's a small but extremely satisfying one. I needed some t-shirts screen printed for a little horsey summer camp I ran. Logo, summer camp, and camper's name, or for staff, their role, lunger, coach, etc. Went to a big chain store that offers this. I've used them multiple times before, and they are great and usually about €10 per shirt, with logo name, etc. And get it done while I browse the store. For some reason, I went to get the ticket and estimate, and it's quoted at €32 per shirt, just for screen print. I'd bought the shirts already, so I asked for a price breakdown. €10 for the logo, €10 for one line text, name or role, €10 for another line of text, Summer Camp 2024. €2 to do it right away. No other orders are in queue. I say, whoa, pull up the company site and say, I would like this service where we design the shirts and then one logo is printed that includes names and camp name and line logo. This is all one color, minimalist line logo. And it's this listed price, like we usually do, and the employee wasn't having it. I can absolutely respect that. Let's go by the book to the letter. So I said, no thank you, went on to Instagram, pulled up like I was making a story and put the logo, name and role, and the summer camp name, and then saved it like an image. Vectorized it on my phone's little photo editing app, and saved. Did that for each camper plus the coach and the lunger. Sent all the images to the store's workshop email, so one logo, which includes text as part of the logo, but the file is technically a vector picture and image for each person, and what do you know, it's actually only €8 for a picture only and non-urgent print. And all this time, I'd been paying 10. My satisfaction was palpable as I stated, okay, I want this logo on this size shirt, this logo for that shirt, etc, etc. And no, I don't want it rushed. Oh, I'm the next order in queue? Perfect. Compliance, or being a stickler, saved me money, and it felt really good. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called HoneyBadger0810. It says, I disagree that there's no malice here. You were expecting €10, they wanted to overcharge you to €32. By complying with their rules, you ended up paying €8. It's malicious because they lost €2 to €24 depending on how you count it. Or, as Lord Beckett might say, it's just good business. OP responded and said, okay, well I'm glad I put it in the right subreddit then. I certainly felt malicious in making sure I wasn't overcharged. It does make you wonder how many people have had to pay that exorbitant fee because they weren't aware of how to do the image thing like OP did on their phone. OP, I love how you turned their own website into your own personal discount handbook. That was absolutely awesome. This story comes to us from Result Downtown 3065. Every decision of care has to be run by you? Okay. Another post reminded me of this story. My mother was a nurse. She worked in the same medical and surgical unit for almost 30 years. Every year, a new set of medical residents would come through. They were mostly nice and eager to learn from everyone, including the nurses. However, there is always an outlier. One afternoon, one of the patients on the floor had an issue. I'm not sure what it was, but it had to do with some treatment that a resident ordered that was not agreeing with the patient. No problem, because this is not the first time this has happened in the history of this said treatment, and there is a written protocol on how to make adjustments. The seasoned nurses have seen this before and have made changes to this order hundreds of times. The nurse in charge did the adjustment and all was well. However, when the prescribing resident found out, she went batcrap crazy, yelling at everyone about usurping her authority. Then she said that any changes to care for her patients had to be approved by her first. Okay, game on. For the next week, this resident was paged for every single solitary thing, especially when the resident went on nap break during 36-hour shifts. This went on for 2 weeks because the resident complained to everyone, thinking that people would side with her. When she saw that the senior doctors or her fellow residents wouldn't back her up, she gave up and let the nurses use their judgment. Never mess with the nurses. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Bodacious Vermin. It says, "This thing that's been working for years or maybe even decades isn't to my liking. I'm gonna use my title to change it up. Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?" Another commenter called Mission Progress 674 said, "There was a written protocol for F's sake. Someone in a higher pay grade signed off on that protocol. It isn't like the nurses are just winging it." Do you want to talk to the doctor in charge or the nurse that knows what's going on? From a bunch of the stories that we've read on this channel, it seems to me like a lot of new doctors have a bit of a god complex, like their crap don't stink, and they can do no wrong and everybody should listen to them, when in reality, they really should be listening to the nurses who have been there for a very long time and could honestly doctor circles around them if they really wanted to. Remember, nurses do twice the work of a doctor for half the price. This story comes to us from Illuminatus Prime. Electronic calculators are forbidden during the exam. Back in the dark ages, before the interwebs or mobile phones, one of my algebra instructors forbade any of us from using electronic calculators during an exam. He even wrote it on the blackboard in big letters. So there I am in the back row, whipping out the answers faster than anyone else in the class. Teacher comes up to me, holds out his hand, and demands I give him my calculator. I hold up my Pickett slide rule and say, "Do you mean this? I said no calculators during the exam. You said no electronic calculators during the exam. Show me where the batteries go and I'll give it up." He got a kinda thoughty look on his face and went back to his desk. I continued the test and turned in my answers about 30 minutes before anyone else. When I got my grade back, it was 98%. Missed 1 out of 50 due to a slipped decimal point. Of course, there were the usual calls of cheater, cheater from the other students, but F them, they should have studied harder. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Mick Crotch. It says, "Anybody who knows how to use a slide rule in this day and age earned it." OP responded and said, "That may have been the algebra teacher's philosophy as well." So I guess you could say that OP made a calculated attack on the rules. And this time the professor figured it was well done and they just had to let this rule slide. This story comes to us from Bookworm Trisha, "The right to not freeze my tush." Back in the dark ages, my town public schools required females to always wear a dress or a skirt and blouse, even in the snowy New England winters. Froze my tush walking a third of a mile to the bus stop and standing there waiting. Boys were supposed to wear dress pants and collared shirts. In high school, student lockers were in the school corridor, and the rule said we needed to remove coats, boots, and other outdoor weather gear there before entering the other rooms. So I and some other female students hatched a plan. When it got cold, we wore pants to school under our skirts, and removed them while standing or sitting in the public corridor. Teachers and principal got upset, but warm pants, corduroy, lined, wool, etc. were specifically listed in the manual. They were, of course, thinking of the boys, qualified as weather gear. When they said to go to a bathroom to change, I pointed to the student rulebook saying weather gear had to be removed before entering the other rooms. More and more girls copied us, and they hated girls maybe accidentally flashing underwear while changing. It could accidentally happen, pulling down pants worn over skirts, and pants crushed the required neat appearance of the skirts. So we won the battle. Pants instead of skirts were allowed all day in winter, which we then stretched to rainy days in spring, and finally they gave up. We could choose to wear pants any day, which soon devolved to jeans and such for everyone. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Learn Japanese. It says, my mom, 75, went to a conservative Christian university that had snow in the winter. They used to have a rule that women had to wear skirts and dresses to class and the testing center. One very cold day, a woman wore pants to the testing center. She was told to come back with a dress on. She went to the bathroom, removed her pants, kept her long heavy winter coat on, and returned to the testing center. She had a test that had to be taken that day. Her long winter coat made it look like she was wearing a skirt. She kept it on while she took the test. No one knew. Later, she told someone what happened. The school officials found out about it and decided to let women wear pants. Again, this was a long time ago. Something important to note after reading this particular story and the comment afterwards is that this is still happening in a lot of schools. There is one close by here that I can drive by anytime, summer, winter, fall, whatever, and all of the girls are outside wearing kilts. Being warm should be a basic right, and I don't know how some of these schools are still holding on to these archaic dress rules. This story comes to us from Newton's Fig, Ashes to Ashes. My sibling is super awful sometimes. Said sibling not only sued me for control over my late parents' estate, but they stole and sold off all kinds of belongings. They also did this while parent was alive. Stole, I mean. Sibling couldn't be bothered to even bring parent a milkshake when they were dying. I had to relocate in order to care for parent. Sibling was also mean to animals and did so to my own beloved fur baby, who I had to send over the bridge shortly after my parent died. Anyways, moving on, just trying to paint the picture lest the reader think I'm an awful person for what happens next. Sibling had agreed that I could have parent's ashes, and I let sibling have the flag that was presented for military service. Suddenly, many years after parent died, sibling decided they wanted some ashes. I, on the other hand, feel strongly that the remains should remain intact. No pun intended. Also, it brings me peace and comforts me, as weird as that sounds, having the remains nearby. So, after much thought and discussion, with a lot of awful words back and forth, I relented. Sibling even got family involved who don't understand our dynamics and sided with sibling. Anyways, sibling may or may not now have my late kitty's ashes on their mantle and may or may not believe they are my parents. OP, I completely understand not wanting to take on the catastrophic task of splitting up your parents. Your sibling really got burned by their own entitlement. I honestly think you handled that situation perfectly, and you persevered through the ultimate sibling squabble. This story comes to us from Syzygy Zeus. Contractors keep calling my phone because someone else gave them my number. So for the past year, I've been getting calls from contractors asking if I want any work done on my property. They start off by calling me by name, which is not mine, and then asking if I live at a certain address, which also isn't mine. I tell them I'm not that person, please stop calling my phone. I tell them I don't own any property, please stop calling my phone. I ask them to put me on their do not call list. Sometimes they just hang up, sometimes they just get rude and say things like, "Why would we stop calling you? You gave us your number." For a long time, I would just hang up before saying anything because when the call connects, It makes this beeping sound when I pick up, so I know it's them before they even say anything. Well, after over a year of this, I decided to say, yep, that's me, when they ask if I'm the person. When they ask me if I still stay at the address, I say, yep, that's my house. When they ask me if I want any solar, landscaping, painting, or driveway work, etc. done, I say, yeah, I sure do. Then they tell me that they will have someone come out to my property. What time is good for me? I tell them a time when traffic is worst, like late afternoon. Then they call me when they get there and tell me they've been waiting for 10 minutes, and I tell them I had to go to the store real quick and I'll be back in 10 minutes. It's very satisfying. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Contractor. It says, "You're still not here? It's been half an hour, and I'll never be there. You guys ready to grow up and stop calling the wrong number? Or should I just waste all of your time every time you screw it up and don't take me off the list like I told you to?" OP responded and said, laugh out loud, exactly. Unfortunately, in this case, the people that are calling you are probably not the people that are actually showing up. It's probably a lead generation service that's calling, and the person showing up is likely a contractor who is actually going to be out money for this because they won't be getting paid their contracting fee if they don't set something up. And even if there is a provision in there where they get at least a little bit of something for showing up, it's likely not going to be what they would get for a full job, and they're out the time that it took to sit there when they could have been working somewhere else and actually making money. You know, you guys might actually be right. After 1,400 videos and like 4,000 stories on here, I may be a little jaded when it comes to my comments about the OPs and the situations that they're in, but sometimes it just stands to reason that things could have been done a different way. This story comes to us from Analytica0. Boss tells me not to email any of her bosses because only she can communicate with them. Years ago, I was working for a large organization. My boss was very nice and pleasant to work with at first. I was hired and tasked with taking a very troubled department and bringing it up in standards. My boss was fairly supportive during the initial few months on the job, but then something changed. The department began to perform and improve greatly within the first 6 months, and this was recognized and heralded by upper management. This made my boss look good and also improved overall morale on the team within the troubled department, as they were finally recognized for their efforts and talents. About this time, 6-month mark, I was told to watch my back by a few other colleagues, both men and women, outside of my department because my boss had a reputation for putting her own success over anyone else's. They also warned me that she was known for being very threatened by any successful males who worked with her. I'm a male. She was a very big champion of the women on her team and regularly promoted and advocated for them. But it seems that every male that worked on her team ended up leaving or getting fired. This was something I was not aware of when I was hired. I also am the only male on the team. After investigating this further, I found there to be some truth to all of this. As it happens, over a 12-year period, over 8 men on her team either quit or were fired. 6 fired and 2 quit. Of the women on her team during the same time period, 8 were promoted, 2 quit, 4 were still on her team, and 0 were fired. So I'm a bit concerned about this now as 1, I am a male, and 2, she has this reputation for making it difficult for men on her team. I just took this all in stride, however, and focused on continuing to manage the department to greater levels, work on continuing to increase the morale of the department, and ensuring I communicate with my boss regularly about any situation that could become problematic for her or me. I also focused on ensuring that she got maximum credit for the improvements of the troubled department, and credited her with being a great boss that ensured the department received the resources and support that it needed to succeed. Fast forward to about my 8th month there, and I am in a meeting with my boss, and she begins to rage against me that I emailed someone who was in the upper management of the company. I explained to her that yes, I did CC that VP because the email in question was one that necessarily involved the entire area under which this particular VP led. She said I am not to do that, and then proceeds to tell me that I am forbidden to email anyone that is above my pay grade, as that is not my place. She then tells me that only she is allowed to email these people, and that if an email needs to go to them, CC or not, she will send it. I ask her if she would like me to send the emails that would need to go to the VPs to her for her to send, and she tells me, yes, send them to me, and then I will send them. I ask her also if she wishes I do not call the VPs on the phone as well, and she says, yes, you are not to call them either. Then she says, I know you may be used to getting your way because you're a man, but this doesn't mean you can try to take my job. What? I'm kind of befuddled at this and just take it all in and decide that I need to respect her wishes because there must be something else going on here which I am not aware of. Okay, fine, we'll do it your way. About a month goes by, and during that time, I only need to email a VP once, and I write up the email to this VP's department, send it to her, and then wait for her to send it on. Now, this email is time sensitive and involves giving the VP and his people a heads up about resources needed for a particular project. Now, the VP must be included in this email because this request involved budgetary issues, and only the VP over a specific area is allowed to change or adapt their budget. Otherwise, I would have just communicated directly with the members of this other VP's team to give them the heads up. So I send the email to my boss, ask her to send it on within the next 3 days, and then I wait. About a week goes by, and I happen to run into this particular VP in the elevator. She asks me about the project, resources, etc., and I let her know that things are good. She then asks about the overrun on this one particular area, and I tell her that it is best she ask my boss. She then asks me to send her an email on this particular overrun, and I let her know, sure, I'll make that happen. I follow back to my boss. I let her know about the conversation with the VP in the elevator, and she blows up at me, starts yelling and screaming, and telling me that I am not to even talk with that VP or any VP about this project. I explained to her that sure, I get it, but it would have been rude to not acknowledge this VP's questions since we were stuck in the elevator together, and I did not seek out that meeting. She then begins to tell me that she has to write me up for being insubordinate and not honoring her request to not email, call, or talk to VPs. I am floored, but nothing I can do. As I am leaving her office, she tells me that I made a mistake in hiring you. I thought you were different, but you're just as entitled as the other men I've hired. Damn. Okay, so this is going really well. Do I go to human resources and have them play their stupid games with me? Nah, not gonna solve anything, especially with the boss that has been at the company 10 years or so. Human resources generally cares very little about employees and only really worries about risk and protecting the company. They aren't gonna do crap for me, so I don't report any of this. I seriously thought about filing a complaint about my boss's comments to me, but when I had the meeting where I had to sign my write-up, I decided against it, given the HR officer had to read the write-up before I signed it. And I figured that since the write-up was based on a BS policy that my boss created out of thin air, I was right in assuming that HR would do crap for me if I had complained anyway. So I just try to get through all this crap and start looking for another job on the side. 2 days later, I get a call from an SVP to whom the VP from the elevator reports to. Now, my boss also reports to another VP. This VP is a female and also not the same one from the elevator, and this VP to whom my boss reports also reports to this SVP. This SVP asks me to come to a meeting that next day. I explain that I'm happy to do so, but I will need to check with my boss first to ensure that there are no conflicts in the schedule. I also state to this SVP that I would appreciate it if she would contact my boss as well to ensure that my boss is made aware of her request. The SVP pauses and then tells me, no, that won't be necessary in this case, and then hangs up. Crap. So I email my boss, tell her that the SVP is requesting to meet with me the next day and wanted to make her aware of the meeting. She comes storming into my office around 5:30 p.m., about an hour before I usually leave, and closes my door and berates me for a good 20 minutes for talking with the SVP. She was so loud that one of the members of the department in which I worked was about to call security just before my boss exited my office. I knew my boss would be mad, but didn't expect anything like this. So the next day, I go to the meeting with the SVP. At that meeting is another 3 VPs. The first is the female VP whom I ran into in the elevator and was asking about overruns. The second is the female VP to whom my boss reports. And the third is a female VP that used to oversee the department in which I presently work. The SVP proceeds to ask me about the overruns. I explain as best as I can about the issues involved and also explain that I had prepared an email a few weeks ago about this. The VP whom I ran into in the elevator states that she never got that email on the cost overruns from me. I then explain that it would not come from me, but would have come from my boss. The VP asks why I wouldn't send it. I say that's not my place to send emails to VPs. Then the SVP stops everyone from talking and says, "What did you just say?" I then reiterate my response. Then the SVP begins questioning me about this point. After about 15 minutes of my explaining to them that I'm not allowed to communicate with them per my boss's orders, they are all pretty disgusted and frustrated. I further explain that this policy was created by my boss and has been consistently enforced by her for the past month or so. They tell me that they will have to come back to me on this, but in the meantime, they will get the emails about the overruns from my boss and follow up with her. Crap, crap, crap. So I go back to my office that day and realize that my head is on the chopping block. I am really in a no-win situation, and I just have to wait for it to play out. And play out it did. I come into work the next day, it's a Thursday, and I don't think anything has changed. Seems like a normal, oppressive day, and I'm just waiting for the axe to fall on my head. I work most of the morning, and then right before lunch, I get an email. The email is from the SVP with all the VPs copied in on it, that my boss is taking some time off and will be back in a few days. During her absence, all requests and management decisions will be made by the VP to whom my boss reports. I'm not quite sure what this means, but given the weekend is coming up, I'm just glad this friggin' week is almost over. Day goes by uneventful, and around 4 p.m., the VP responsible for the department in which I work comes down and comes into my office and tells me that as of that day, my department and I am no longer reporting to my boss, but I was now reporting directly to her. I asked what that means for the department and my job. She said nothing. It just means that the department will be better served under this new reporting structure, given the increase in the amount of business that the department was engaged in since my hire, as well as the strategic internal leverage that would be needed going forward. I also was explicitly told that I was free to now communicate with any other VPs or SVPs of the organization as I saw fit. She then apologized for the experience I had with my boss and told me that she was unaware of my boss forbidding me to communicate with her or other VPs or SVPs. I take this all in, not knowing whom is telling the truth, but relieved that I will no longer have to endure being treated like a child by my boss. I then ask about my boss and her reporting relationship to my department's other team members, and was told that she was forbidden to execute orders to them on her own unless she has my prior approval. Karma. I stay at this company about 3 years total, have a great working relationship with the VP, whom was now my boss, as well as the other VPs and SVP to whom they reported. I only left when I got a better offer in a different industry. My former boss was eventually counseled out over a 3-month period after HR investigated her behavior, interviewed me about the arbitrary rules about communicating with VPs that my boss had enforced on me, as well as her shouting at me and writing me up and disparaging me as a male. Talk about karma. Her write-up of me was used as evidence that she actually had implemented this no-contact policy solely with me, and because she wrote it up and put it in my employee file, it proved my veracity about the entire no-contact issue. In addition, and also compounding the problem, other alleged issues concerning cost overruns, financial reporting irregularities that she had hidden over the years. I have never seen her again, but if I ever do, I would love to be able to say to her, "Great seeing you again. I always tell people that you're the boss that taught me the importance of using email to further my career." Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Christiane Red. It says, "Here's the thing. There are feminists and then there are sexists. This woman was a sexist. She allowed her belief that she was a champion for women to drive her into becoming exactly the kind of person she hates so much. Sexism isn't solely male or female driven, it's purely the belief that one sex should be treated better than the other." OP responded to this one and said, "Yeah, good point. And like I said, she was just a terrible person. And her attitude toward men was just one part of her overall crappy persona." Another commenter down below called Snowbar said, "I'm surprised you didn't ask her to email you about the no contact above your pay grade instructions." OP responded to this one and said, "I was treading lightly as I was still pretty new to the company. I actually did send her an email stipulating my understanding of that policy after she and I met about my talking with the VP on the elevator. It helped HR later." I feel like the main reason why OP's boss didn't want OP emailing the VPs or the SVPs is because OP's boss was trying to hide how she was treating OP. Obviously, there were other reasons as well, like she just wanted to control the communications in a way that would favor her narrative and so she could take credit. She may have also felt like OP was a threat to her position, even though OP was doing everything that she said. One thing I can tell you for sure is that it is a wonderful feeling to watch somebody like this get their just desserts. This story comes to us from Sarcasm Spelunker. Boss says, "Just do your job." I said, "As you wish." I work at a tech company and my official job is fairly simple, and I find that I have free time decently often. My unofficial extra jobs used to be monitoring the morale level in the office and doing things to bring up said morale. Tech support on the computers in the office, so IT doesn't have to deal with it, mostly because I'm faster than they are at getting things going again, assuming the problem isn't hardware related, and often enough helping out in other departments when I have the time. A promotion comes up, I apply for it. The boss gives it to someone who had only been hired a few months ago. I was annoyed by this because I had been working there for much longer, and my evaluations were always glowing. Another promotion comes up, I get denied again in favor of another person who has only been there for a few months. 3 more promotions come and go, and my boss always gives the new people the promotions. At this point, several people who have been hired around the same time I have all quit to seek opportunity elsewhere, and many of the people who got promoted also quit because they used their promotion to get a better job elsewhere. Also, the boss likes to send an email with a BS canned denial letter with some official reason as to why you were not selected. I eventually decide to confront my boss about it, so I just bluntly ask, "What am I doing wrong? Why are people who have been recently hired getting promotions over me?" The boss couldn't answer. He stumbles and stutters for about 2 minutes, like the sniveling pencil neck he is, eventually just blurts out, "Look, you don't have much experience in dealing with people below you, and I really need you to just do your job." Alright, as you wish. Now, anytime someone asks me if I can get their computer, monitor, printer, etc. working properly again, I tell them to ask tech support. My bi-weekly delivery of homemade confections has come to an end, and I no longer lift a finger to help other departments, even when I do have the extra time. Tech support can take a surprisingly long time to get around to our department. Something I could have done in 10 minutes, it will take them an hour or more. It's also a 3-person department in a fairly large office building. My boss pulls me into his office a while back and asked me if I have a problem. I told him I don't have a problem. He then reminds me of all the things that I used to do that I suddenly don't do anymore. Then makes the mistake of asking me why I suddenly stopped. I told him that none of those were part of my job description, and that I only did those things as a courtesy. But since he told me to just do my job and strongly hinted that I am to go no further in the company, I am going to just do what is part of my official job description from now on. He went from having a crap-eating smirk on his face, ready to tear into me for my sudden change in demeanor, to realizing that he can't say a darn thing because he knows that he can't order me to do anything outside of my official job description, and that he screwed himself and his entire department over by basically telling me to shut up and get back to work. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Servatka. It says, "Please say you're searching for other employment." OP responded and said, "Searching, not much luck finding something that pays better. That, and I know I can outlast this boss. He'll be gone by the end of the year. Our metrics have been going to crap since he got here, and I already know his boss is not happy about that." Responding to this, another commenter called Dynamite Disco Dave said, "You need to have a chat to the next level boss and replace your current manager with yourself." OP responded to this one and said, "Half the reason I'm still there is that possibility. Aside from not finding better for the same or better pay, I don't trade down." In my experience, the more extra work you do, the more extra work you will be expected to do. And then they kind of take for granted that you're doing all that extra work, and you get no extra recognition for it. If OP wasn't promoted into the boss's role, I hope they were able to find a workplace that appreciated them for everything they did. And if they were able to get into the boss's role, I hope they treat people below them as they wish to be treated themselves. This story comes to us from 0x1337 Dude. "You want it fast? Fine. But don't cry when it blows up in your face." I work at a big retail chain where the stockroom is the Wild West and chaos is the norm. We recently got a new supervisor, Sarah, who seems to think she's running the Navy SEALs or something. She's obsessed with speed, constantly on us about how we need to get things done faster. Doesn't matter if it's done right, as long as it's done fast. So one day, during peak restock time when we're drowning in boxes, Sarah storms in with her clipboard and her best "I'm in charge" face. She corners me while I'm halfway through a massive inventory check and says, "You're taking way too long with these, just get through them quickly, we don't have time to check every single item." I try to explain that rushing inventory checks is a bad idea, but she cuts me off with a condescending smile. "If you can't speed this up, maybe this job isn't the right fit for you," she says, all smug like she just dropped a bombshell. "Alright Sarah, you want speed? Let's see how fast things can spiral out of control." So I take her words to heart and decide to follow her instructions exactly. The next day, I'm scheduled for another inventory check. Instead of my usual process where I count everything carefully, I decide to play Sarah's game. I glance at the shelves and make up numbers that seem about right. I don't even bother opening boxes to check if what's inside matches the labels. I fly through the whole process, marking items off like I'm speedrunning a video game. What usually takes me 2 hours, I finish in just 20 minutes. Sarah sees me finishing up, and I can see her eyes light up. She walks over, grinning ear to ear. "See, that wasn't so hard, was it? If you keep this up, you might even get a little bonus this month," she says, patting herself on the back for her brilliant leadership skills. Fast forward a week, and the store manager Mike calls an emergency meeting. The inventory reports have come back, and they're a total disaster. According to the report, we're missing thousands of dollars worth of products. It looks like we either lost half the stock, or we're running some underground black market. Mike's pissed, customers are complaining about out-of-stock items, and the regional manager is breathing down his neck. Mike turns to Sarah and asks her to explain how this could have happened. Sarah, trying to save face, immediately points at the team and says, "They must have messed up the counts, they weren't thorough enough." She's throwing us under the bus without a second thought. This is where I decide to strike. I raise my hand and say, "Actually, I did exactly what Sarah told us to do." She said to skip checking the items and just get it done as quickly as possible. I was just following orders. You could hear a pin drop. Mike slowly turns to Sarah, his expression going from confused to furious. "Is this true?" he asks, narrowing his eyes at her. Sarah's stammering now, trying to backpack. "Well, I didn't mean to skip it entirely. I just meant to speed it up." But it's too late. The damage is done. Mike's already fuming. "So you decided to cut corners on the one thing that affects our bottom line. You do realize we have to do a full recount now because of this mess, right?" And that's exactly what happens. The next day, Sarah and a few unlucky team members spend 12 hours redoing the entire inventory check from scratch. The rest of us get to enjoy watching them sweat it out while we handle our regular duties. It's glorious. As they're counting, I make sure to walk by every so often and ask, "Need any help speeding things up? I could skip a few checks for you if that helps." The look on Sarah's face every time is pure rage, mixed with embarrassment. She can't say anything because she knows I'm just doing what she asked for. By the end of it, we found thousands of dollars in discrepancies. Turns out, rushing through inventory checks leaves a lot of room for errors. Who knew? The regional manager isn't happy, and Sarah ends up getting a formal warning. She stops harping on us about speed after that, and even tries to be extra nice whenever I'm around. Guess she realized that maybe, just maybe, some tasks shouldn't be rushed. The best part, a couple of weeks later, I get a small bonus for outstanding attention to detail in helping fix the inventory mess. Oh, the irony. Sarah couldn't even look me in the eye when I got the bonus slip. And every time she walks by me now, I just give her a friendly smile and say, "Don't worry, boss, I'm working as fast as you want." Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Popular Drummer 7989. It says, "Fail faster. I can't tell you how my blood boils when I hear unqualified leaders use it as an attempt to motivate productivity. The best response is, as you wish." This was Sarah's F around and find out moment. Too bad she got to keep her job. Another commenter down below called Gymnast Girl said, "Sounds like she might have learned the lesson. You can do two things at this point. Continue to be antagonistic and make an enemy, except that she learned and treat her like a human who has learned and move on. You might gain a better coworker out of the latter." There is a huge divide between a good supervisor and, well, Sarah. A good supervisor is going to come to you, realize that things aren't being done fast enough, and work with you to see how it can get done faster, maybe even help you get it done. Sarah took the approach of, "I don't know how to do my job, so you probably don't know how to do yours either, but you need to do yours faster." Here's hoping that with the reprimand and the write-up and now knowing how to do things properly, Sarah becomes a better supervisor. This story comes to us from Cheesy Friend. "Let me get your change." I work at a gas station in Oregon, with half the pumps being self-serve and half being mini-service, which means that we're there to pump your gas for you, but not obligated to do anything else, like wash your windshield. But we do when we're asked to be nice. There's this lady that comes in almost every day and gets like $5 or $10 worth of gas, asks us to wash her windshield, and never tips. She's really weird about it, like it's her little power trip. Last time she was in, it was raining, and she still smugly asked me to wash her windshield. And being the hardcore customer service guy, I did, but then I thought twice about it after the fact. I go that length for nice folks, but she's not nice. She's bitchy and whiny and weird. So windshield lady comes in today and hands me $9 for gas, and then, as usual, asks me to wash her windshield with a smug look on her face. I said I would, but then by the time I got back out, there were a good 8 cars on the pumps. I told her, "I'm sorry, I can't do your windshield right now, it's too busy." Well, she gets really snotty with me and has me stop the pump, which means that since she paid cash, she needs her change. Okay, you'll get your change. I went inside and told my coworker I need the change on pump too, but make sure to vend extra pennies from the safe and put 50 of them in there loose. He looked at me like I was crazy, but then I explained who it was for, and so he gladly handed me over the change. By the way, we have to wait in line inside the attached convenience store with other customers to get change for gas, because our pump guy often doesn't have their own till open for a shift. So, as I was standing in line to get windshield lady's change, she came inside and was death glaring our other customers, and then must have seen me waiting and went back out to her car. She was already getting snotty with me the moment I walked back out to her car, so I put the $3 bills in her hand and then an absolute cascading buttload of pennies and a few nickels on them. "Sorry, we're short on silver," I said. The look on her face, that was the most satisfying use of pennies ever. She sounded like Milton from Office Space. She was still stammering when she was driving away, and I didn't listen to or identify a single word she said. Hoping this will discourage her from coming back, but if it doesn't, then we will once again have a shortage of silver change. Because, alas, that is the economy we are in. Times are tough. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Equivalent Salary 357. It says, make sure she pays before you start the pump. Tomorrow, if she arrives with 1,000 pennies, refuse to pump her gas until you have counted the payment. It would be a shame if you lost count around 500 and 600 and have to start over. A real shame. Be sure to apologize profusely. Another commenter down below called Pupperoni42 said, well done. If she tries again, start by slowly and carefully cleaning the passenger side windshield or the back windshield. When the pump is done dispensing the small amount of gas she bought, pull the squeegee away and tell her to have a nice day. But you didn't finish the windshield. You're right. There's just not enough time to clean the entire windshield during a $5 fill. I have other work to do now, but you're welcome to finish the windshield yourself. Say this in your peppiest customer service voice while walking away, ideally into the building and straight through an employee's only door. This customer just sounds like an absolutely wonderful person. I mean, who has to take the time to make little power plays against a service worker to make them feel better about themselves for the day? Like, what the heck is that? OP, if this person is nasty and belligerent to you every time they come in, make sure your manager knows about it, because you can refuse service to a customer if they're being a dick. This story comes to us from Najee2020. Treat the fire drill as if it was real. My great uncle passed away at 97 and heard this great story of malicious compliance at his memorial service today. He worked for over 50 years at the same confectionery factory, and for most of that time, he was a boiler room attendant. This was just after World War II, and at the time, most of the machines and processes were powered by steam, even the heating. The steam was generated by massive boilers, and it was his job to monitor the boilers to make sure nothing went wrong. These boilers could potentially explode, causing great damage. By law, the boiler had to be attended at all times, and there were shifts that watched them around the clock, even when the factory was closed. They took so long to heat up that it was easier and cheaper to leave them running at night. After about 10 years of no incidents, the company hired a leading hand who would also act as the safety officer. He had been a sergeant in the army and he took his job quite seriously, being quite the disciplinarian. He instituted a multitude of new procedures, some warranted, some just to establish control. The first time he wanted to conduct a fire drill, he went around telling the staff that when they heard the alarm, they had to exit the building in an orderly fashion. He got to the boiler room, and it was my great uncle on duty that day. He informed him he would not be able to evacuate with everyone else and had to stay with the boiler. The safety officer didn't give him time to explain why. He just bluntly informed him that he was to treat the fire drill as if it was a real fire, no exceptions. When the fire bell finally rang, my uncle did exactly what he was told to do. He turned off the gas to the boilers, vented all the built-up steam, purged the water, and joined everyone outside. At the evacuation point, they were doing a head count when the production manager spotted my uncle and immediately approached him and asked what he was doing away from the boiler. He said he was participating in the fire drill as instructed, but not to worry as he had shut the boiler down completely. The color immediately drained from the manager's face. He was asked how long it would take to bring the boilers back online. Apparently, it would take hours alone just to fill the boilers with water and heat them up. The big issue was that because they had done an emergency purge, they were required to inspect every pipe, joint, and connection for damage before to make sure it was safe to start to reheat. The other boilermen were called in and they got paid double time to work through the night to get the boiler ready for the next day. Production staff all got sent home but still got paid for the day as it wasn't their fault the factory couldn't run. It cost them a day's production as well. Safety officer did keep his job, but for the next 40 years, the boiler staff were all exempt from fire drills. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called NotRasta8913. It says, if only there was a way to simulate a real evacuation without the boilers being shut down. Like, have another crew who knew it was a drill, ready to take over when the alarm sounded, and then the crew on duty could touch simulate the shutdown and evacuate. Okay, well that sounds like a great idea. Do you think the company managers who are trying to pinch every penny are actually going to want to bring in extra people to do a fire drill? I don't think so. I also have to point out down in the comments there was another person that said, steam is just angry water. That is amazing. This story comes to us from Joseph DK23. You must cite sources for all homework assignments. So I'm working on my master's, and several weeks ago, we had an assignment to give our thoughts on a discussion topic. I completed the assignment with no sources because it's my opinion. Why would I be using any sources in the first place? Well, I got a message asking me to resubmit and include my sources. When I asked about it being my opinion, I got back, every assignment you submit this semester must have proper citations. Well, a few weeks later, we have an assignment to watch 5 videos and write a few key points from each, should be a page or less. Well, I made sure to include the proper citations for each and every video, which ended up taking half the page. Now, I just have to include a bullet point with a summary of each video. OP added an edit and said, edit, because everyone keeps saying that I should be citing sources for anything, you're right. However, this is an online university like University of Phoenix, and the teachers really do not care. I have never received less than full points for simply completing an assignment. Each class has discussions and assignments. Every professor, except this one, treated discussions like a classroom discussion, wanting people to express their opinions and knowledge. If you have a good source, good. If not, that's okay. This is the only class that's required sources for these discussions. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called YogiT. It says, interesting. At my university, citations are treated as an appendix and don't count for your pages. Also, I think it is very good of this professor to try and teach you academic writing, as you are supposedly doing a master's. Another commenter down below called the Silver Falcon said, you're going to have a bad time if you can't admit you're wrong on something so minor, especially when you start getting feedback on major projects. Do you really want to fight this particular battle, or do you want your degree? Yep, in the comment section for this one, pretty much everybody unanimously agrees that OP was the person in the wrong. In this case, OP, I don't think they're just asking you for citations. I think they're asking you to look into what you're doing a little bit more, maybe spend some time finding arguments from other sources that you can use, and not just saying, oh, my source is just, trust me, bro. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to your favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.